welcome everyone to the Mesa City Council study session for October the 29th. I note that I think all of our council is here, but with the possible exception of Mr. Heredia. Frankie, are you on the call? Okay. Have we heard that Mr. Heredia is not going to be with us this morning?
I have not heard anything, Mayor.
Okay. We do have a couple other callers on the call, but I think they're part of the presentation. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and begin the meeting and look forward to Mr. Heredia joining us, hopefully before too long. The first item on our agenda for this meeting is to review and discuss items on the agenda on the November 2nd regular council meeting agenda. So, council, if you'd please refer to that document. Currently, there are no items off of the consent agenda.
Oh.
Yes, Councilmember Duff.
Yes, I just want to have a review, and maybe we'll have it in the presentation on item 4D of the leasing of hotel rooms for our homeless community, whether that is just something we're doing for this year, is it something we're looking at continuing long term? And we don't need to discuss it now if it is part of the presentation, but I just wanted to have a better overview of what we're planning to do.
Sure, we'll cover that in the presentation, but this is for next year, yes.
Great. Council, any other items on Monday's agenda that you'd like additional information on? Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. On 5C, I'd just like to point out that this grant, sub-grant award, $1.4 million, is pretty significant for our Family Advocacy Center. That's a huge funding mechanism to help those that need protection and safety and in our advocacy center. So I appreciate all those for making that happen, Mr. Brady. That's an important funding mechanism for our police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. And I will note that Mr. Heredia is with us via the telephone. He's having some internet issues, but he, Frankie, you're on the phone and on the meeting, is that right? I know his text message indicated that he's on the phone, so I think he is. We'll look forward to him participating.
That number on there.
Council, any other questions regarding Monday's agenda? Okay, moving on to the agenda for today's meeting. The first item is to hear a presentation, discuss, and provide direction on the city's proposed strategic plan to reduce homelessness through service coordination, enforcement, and a housing path to recovery. I know we've all been looking forward to having a bigger discussion on this, so and a lot of work has got into this. So Natalie and I think a host of folks are going to come in and tell us what they've learned on this topic. Natalie?
Good morning, Mayor and members of the City Council. Thank you so much for having me this morning. My name is Natalie Lewis. I'm a Deputy City Manager, and I'm joined with me this morning with Aaron Rain, who is our homeless coordinator and works very hard out in the field for us, but is also a detective in the police department. And later, Assistant Chief Ed Wessing is going to be joining us as well when we get to the point of talking about some of the in-the-field operations and how things are handled. So first, I just want to let you know why we're bringing this forward and why we're bringing it forward now. Homelessness, as the mayor mentioned, continues to be a growing concern, not only for our city council, but for our community. And during COVID, we've learned a lot, and I think interest and has even been expanded even more during that time period. And so we had started this strategic plan before COVID, and we pulled it back together because we feel like we need this tool moving forward. It will be a focus for us on homeless activities and specific strategies that we want to achieve in the next 0 to 3 years. We're focusing on our unsheltered population of homeless, which does include a variety of homeless. It includes singles and families and youth and veterans and all different populations, seniors. And unsheltered are also very visible in the community. And so we're seeing, the community is seeing more evidence of homelessness more than ever. The other thing that we're doing is we have included this strategic plan as part of our housing master plan. So it is basically a section within that plan, and that plan will be forthcoming to City Council for review and discussion in December. This is not a one-size-fits-all. It's not supposed to be a stationary tool. It's going to be evolving. But let's go ahead and get into what we'll be talking about today. So we'll talk a little bit about the state of homelessness, not only in Maricopa County, but in Mesa, and in particular focus on the unsheltered population. We're going to talk about the guiding principles and strategies that we have created. We've based these on values that we've heard from the community, and the strategies have been formulated based on feedback from our community partners and nonprofits, Save the Family, Mesa United Way, New Leaf, comments and feedback that we've gotten very directly from the City Council, from the community, lessons that we've learned during COVID, and we've added some items in there and strategies in there that help us stretch further and take what we're already doing and make it even better. Next we'll just go to, oh, there you go, no, there you go. So we'll start first with countywide and those numbers. So, first, just to say that you'll see on this chart that homelessness has been growing, and it's been growing pretty dramatically over the last 5 years. This is not just a Maricopa County phenomenon, and it's not just a Mesa phenomenon. This has been going on in the United States and at state levels, and so there's been a lot of growth. But if you look at the red bars in here, that represents the unsheltered populations in the county itself. And just in the last 5 years, those red bars, basically the number of unsheltered homeless in the county has tripled. And so this kind of shows us the evidence of why our community is seeing more homeless and the concerns about safety, but also about balancing needs in our facilities is coming to the forefront, and the council's hearing more about it and seeing it more out in Mesa. Because of that, we also wanted to look at what was happening very directly for Mesa. And this is the last 3 years, and it's consistent with the trend that we've been seeing in the county. It shows you that in 2017, where we found unsheltered homeless in Mesa, and it shows you in 2020 how the geographic spread has continued throughout the city of Mesa. It's also an indicator, just so council knows, that we've gotten better at finding our homeless. We have better partnerships with the police department and others who really know where to find them. And so some of that geographic distribution is a result of us being able to be better at our jobs of finding them and counting our unsheltered homeless. But in this 3-year time period, the unsheltered population has doubled in Mesa. The data that we use for this is through a point-in-time count. It's once per year in January. So it's limited in that it's just one time that we're able to find it, but it's the best that we have, and it's something that's very consistent that's used in the entire country. The other system we have is called the Homeless Management Information System. And this is something that we also use so that we know who is accessing services for homelessness throughout the county and the state and the nation, so that we're able to keep track of what's happening and not duplicate services to the extent possible. There is an industry standard that basically states that if you have a certain number in the homeless management information system, about 30% is what you will probably have for unsheltered populations. So in Mesa, even though our point in time count says we found 338 people this year experiencing homelessness, we actually have about 3,200 people that have been receiving services in the homeless management information system, which kind of gets us more to about 960 to 1,000 unsheltered human beings out there that we need to serve, and is really our core and targeted audience here. So based on all of this, we have created the strategic plan. We're focusing on the unsheltered population. We have learned a lot during COVID, and we're going to continue to grow some of the programs that we've done. The strategic plan was created as a policy and resource and guidance document for the city council and the community. It's meant to be a standalone document, but it's also meant to be a core portion of the housing master plan. So a quick overview of what that includes. The guiding principles are value-based. Public safety is a priority. Again, this is about balancing the uses of all different city facilities. Being homeless is not a crime, but when crime is happening, we need to enforce it and respond, and so we are working very diligently to do so. We need to make sure that we have a wise investment of taxpayers, federal dollars and local dollars. And we have a lot of efforts right now to make sure that the dollars that we are investing in Mesa stay in Mesa, that they are helping Mesa-based people experiencing homelessness. We're going to continue with our strong collaborations with our nonprofits. We have amazing nonprofits in Mesa, and they have robust and programs, and they understand how to use federal dollars. We want to continue funding successful programs with them.
Natalie, I think that's prompted a couple questions from some council members. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. Natalie, on that slide, the second bullet point, enforce urban camping. Is that supposed to be enforce urban camping laws, or are we enforcing urban camping?
So, yeah, so the Martin v. Boise Ninth Circuit Court came out, and there was a lot of uncertainty about how we could enforce urban camping because they basically let us know that it's not illegal to sleep in public and in public spaces. But as long as we can go to people and offer a bed, if it is off hours, let's use a park as an example. It's off hours, they're camping in one of our parks. Our police officers can approach them, offer them services and a bed immediately. And if they refuse that, then they can enforce the urban camping laws. And so we are being very aggressive and assertive in that because we want to connect people. The people who want help and need help, we want to connect them and really lead with service, but we also need to enforce our laws, and so that is a focus for us too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Mr. Luna has a question.
Thank you, Natalie, for that presentation. My question was, it looks like it appears through the strategic plan that you came up with is part of the master plan, housing plan that we're going to be approving at the city council level. Now, tell me about your community partners. I see Jackie Taylor's here. I see Mark Young. Maybe if they could speak to how they're going to be involved in that process. Why don't you give us just a little preview of how that happened, how you brought all these individuals together to come up with your strategic plan, and then if Jackie and maybe Mark can talk about why it's important that we go in this direction.
Okay. Well, let me.
David, I think I'm as anxious as you are to hear from Jackie and Mark, but I wonder, Natalie, I see several more slides here. Are you planning on incorporating those folks into your presentation as we get through these slides?
I have them on here so that they can respond to questions that the council has because they have been involved in what we do. They're very involved on a day-to-day basis. We can have them talk right now if that's the council's pleasure, but I do have more to say, and I would like to get through the presentation so that we can then just start talking in whole, because I might end up answering some of your questions beforehand.
Mayor, I'm fine with that. Natalie can go ahead and finish her presentation,
okay,
and then we can ask the questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, and one other clarification that I wanted to make on Councilmember Thompson's question is if there are homeless in our parks, that same example during the day, we always have to be cognizant that, if anybody can take a blanket to the park and, some food and lay out and rest and even take a nap, so can our homeless. So we have to be cognizant of those laws and those, but if crime is happening, if we see evidence of crime, then we do take action.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Any other questions before Natalie proceeds? All right. Thank you.
So the other thing that we have been participating in regularly are regional conversations. And I think council will probably have some questions related to this, and I'm going to go into more detail a little bit later in my presentation. But what we're talking about regionally, and this is actually Phoenix and Mesa, is that we're redefining what regional means to our cities. And we want to make sure that the surrounding communities are helping to share in the cost and the impacts, the direct services in their communities, so that it doesn't become as big of a burden on the center cities. And so that is something that we are engaging in, and I'm going to be coming back to the City Council in the next few weeks to have even more of a detailed conversation about your recommendations and for how Mesa can continue being in that conversation and what you're willing to have the staff present on our behalf. So there will be a whole lot more coming in the future about the regional conversation. Another principle is to measure and communicate our results. We've been very busy out in the field doing things. We haven't done as good of a job of telling the story of what we've been able to achieve. We're going to start doing that with a communication strategy through the mayor's office, and I think Councilmember Duff is also helping us. It's going to include some PSAs and other things to help us get the word out. And then last but not least, this housing path to recovery. This is a core portion of the strategic plan. We have identified the different types of housing that help our homeless that we have today. We're focusing on the Mesa-based and making sure we're getting as much capacity out of that. But we've also identified a few gaps, and we've been able to fill some of those, and we'll talk about that a little bit later too. So now I'll go through each of the strategies. For public safety, we're going to continue the Off the Streets program into calendar year 2021. Councilmember Duff, the item that's on the November 2nd agenda is related to allowing us to fund hotel rooms, lease hotel rooms for this purpose. Those hotel rooms will be funded through emergency solutions grants that have been provided to us for coronavirus purposes. So you will also hear about this when the federal funding process comes forward, and you will hear about it during the Housing Master Plan as well, and probably during the budget process coming up. We're going to enforce urban camping, which is what we've already talked about for Councilmember Thompson's question. We want to do everything we can to ensure that everyone who comes to our parks, to our libraries, to our new city center, other public spaces, that they feel welcome and they feel safe, and that families feel, that they can bring their children and they will be safe there. We want to integrate technology in everything that we do. We've put in some cameras that are on poles to help us with surveillance of the parks in particular and some of the hotspots in Mesa. We're going to continue the community court. This has been highly successful. Judge Tatz, who was the community court judge, is continuing in that capacity. Even though he's now our presiding judge, he helped build it. It's amazing. And it serves as a really good incentive for people that are a little hesitant to get service, that if they start doing the hard work toward recovery, that helps us release some of their fees and citations so that they could be more successful moving forward. And then we need to reduce evictions during COVID, and this is a very high priority for the City Council. We're working on rent assistance, utility assistance, but at the end of the day, if people do lose their homes, we want to make sure that we're able to get them shelter right away so that we can get them stabilized and back. The next strategy is about the use of public funds. Again, this is about using Mesa's funds as wisely as possible. We want them to be invested in Mesa. We want to fund successful programs. Service navigation has been a huge factor in what we've done and what we've been able to do to help people in their path to recovery. We want to continue funding that, and we want to continue funding our nonprofits who are doing amazing work out there. We want to continue helping our veterans. The city has vouchers. It's an amazing asset. We have made some progress with our Housing Our Heroes program, and we want to continue that path, and we're going to be bringing in the Veterans Center downtown to help take that to another level very soon, and they're interested in that conversation. And then as it relates to jobs, we're researching what the city could do right now. We haven't made a whole lot of determinations yet, but what we know is we want to supplement what the nonprofits are already doing. We want to make sure that there's good collaboration there. And what we have learned is that you can't really help people very successfully with finding or placing them in jobs if they're homeless unless they have really good support services and housing. So they need to have some level of stabilization in order to really be able to launch and to train for jobs and to be successful at getting placed into them. So there'll be more on that as well. Strategies for working regionally, we've set aside some CDBG dollars, $1.5 million, just so that when the time comes that the city does have the ability to help and participate if we want to. I've talked about being at the table at an East Valley level. Our city manager is very involved in those conversations. I'm involved, Aaron's involved at other levels of the region and the system that we work. We need to continue advocacy both at the regional level but also at the state level and work with each other to do that. And we need to have a conversation about what regional means for all of the communities. And especially the governing boards and the community members. We need to understand what regional means to them because regional for us means equity and sharing those service impacts. And so we need to continue that dialogue. And then transparency and communications, I've talked about that. I also want to make sure that we are starting to feed a data portal so that we're being very open about lots of different things that we've been doing with this work and the success stories that we really do have out there. I think people forget about the great things that our nonprofits are doing and that the city is doing as well. So the last thing that we talked about is this housing path to recovery. So what we had done and have done during COVID is taken a look at the existing assets out there, and we have a lot of them. But we also discovered that we need some additional tools. And one of them is the operation off the streets and leasing the hotel rooms. What that provides for all of us is this immediate access to housing and to shelter, immediate access to 24/7 services and help and stabilization and helping a family or an individual understand that there's hope and that we want them to be committed to a path to recovery. And so the operation off the streets has really served as that, and it's helped us so that when they get to the next step, which is our existing shelters. So this would be the East Valley Men's Shelter, this would be our domestic violence shelters, this would be our iHelp types of facilities, rent assistance. When they get to that level and there's more structure, they're ready for the structure. They're ready for that next step in their recovery. They're ready to start thinking about jobs training and to go through different counseling and healthcare options. And, and if they're in community court, that they will have access to a shelter because they'll be prioritized. The third level is what we're calling our Bridge to Success. And this is also an area that we do not have today and that we want to build. We have not completely gotten through our investigations yet, but more information will be coming to City Council. But the idea here is if somebody is in a shelter and their time is up and they're not necessarily quite ready to get to that affordable rental, we want our success stories, our people that are making progress, to have a few extra months of assistance where it's really focused on the jobs part of it and supplementing that, but also finding that more permanent stable housing. So connecting them to housing vouchers if we can, or VASH vouchers, or rent assistance that the city has at our disposal, and working again with our nonprofits. The next is our affordable rental, and this is something that we do very well at, and our nonprofits are very good at providing. And this is where, now they've been so successful, they can get into some rental and be there for at least a year, sometimes even 2, still receive services, and continue towards that last step of independence and self-sustainability. We see that not everybody's going to go through this entire system. Some people will. Some people during the COVID who just maybe, lose their homes for a short period of time, we'd like to have them have access to the bridge to success. So they have immediate shelter, but they have the ability to go and find some affordable rental, use housing vouchers if we have them, and get stable and get back into a home and part of their life. So we know that people will enter and exit the system in different ways and places. And so we just want to make sure we have it so that no matter what happens and whatever the situation is, we have the type of housing that's needed for recovery and a path toward it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and invite Assistant Chief Ed Wessing to join us as well. One of the things that happens when we talk to our community members and some of our council members is we hear a lot of questions about how we do things. And it's difficult because there is no one size fits all when it comes to populations of people experiencing homelessness and the very complexities of this human condition and what it means. But what we try to do is use a combination of very sound judgment, making sure everybody in our process and our partners knows what services are available and how to connect people to them. And that we are doing a good job of referring to each other and making that work. So we thought we would start with some common questions that we've heard and respond to them. So Aaron and Ed will be helping me do that. So the first one is, let's say a nonprofit starts an intervention. They don't necessarily have the right kind of housing available for this particular family or individual. Maybe it's the school district, and they're trying to get a family to get off the streets and come forward and accept some help. What is it that we do with that? And I'll ask Aaron to respond to that.
So traditionally, it would be a struggle for, say, a police officer that had encountered this to try and figure out which nonprofit might work. What we've done is we've partnered with Community Bridges, who kind of acts as the front office suite that connects through United Way, Save the Family, through the Housing Hub, and gets people connected. But with the motel rooms, it gives the opportunity to place them in a safe environment so that they can get their needs met, food, shelter, safety, all the things that we all deserve, and get those needs met while they continue through the process.
Okay. The second question is, let's say our police officers are out in the field, they encounter some individuals that are refusing help. They're just not really interested in recovery for whatever reason. They're not ready. This happens a lot with people experiencing homelessness because we ask them to get sober and we ask them to do some very hard, life-changing things. So we've approached them. What do we do at this point? I'll ask Ed to go ahead and with that one.
Morning, Mayor and Council. If I could actually introduce Lieutenant Tim McClary, who's the coordinator for us at the police department with the enforcement efforts across the city. He's on the call. If he could go ahead and come on and answer that question for us. Tim, did you get the question that Natalie just discussed?
Yes, I did, Chief. I am Tim McClary, Mayor and Council. Nice to see you this morning. The chief had tasked us this last year through direction from the City Council and management that we needed to help out with this project as being presented today. And one of the things that we've done a little bit differently is in the past, you've heard of Operation Mainline, where we would just look for people voluntarily to come with us and receive services. And the distinctive difference this time around, starting when we started this part of the project on the police side in May, was that we wanted to address community concerns of crime and reports of nuisance, things that were going on. So therefore, our contact teams with the police, when they did contact persons who were involved, who were experiencing homelessness, they also were people who were committing a civil violation or a criminal violation, which just gives us a little more ability to make a contact that's not consensual just for a temporary purpose of making that contact. A lot of times people didn't want to talk to us at all, and we really can't force someone to talk to us unless there's been a violation. So under that pretext, we are able to offer services if it's a minor offense right away. Other times, if it's obviously more of an ongoing problem, like urban camping or straight out trespass or other issues going on, assaults, other crimes happening like in a park, for instance, those are things that we would not only make a charge into the judicial system, but we would also flow it into the community court system with the city of Mesa. And in doing so, that's just another way to provide services, only it's under the context that the judge and people there will give options for, are you willing to receive some services that will help your situation, get some identification, get some temporary housing, some counseling, as opposed to punitive issues. So that's kind of the beginning of how our operation worked differently. And it's been pretty amazing so far, over 3,700 contacts since May of homelessness, and 79% of those have entered the judicial services of it. 20 and the other 43 to 21% have also received human services. So basically, it's been pretty successful in that part of it from us. It's a different change for us in that we used to have a once a month program where we would go out and just voluntarily ask people randomly to, if they were homeless, they wanted services. And I think this is just a new tactic for us. Does that answer the question?
It did, Tim. I appreciate it. One thing I just wanted to mention that specific to this bullet point, when we do encounter folks, sometimes their families that are temporarily housed in vehicles, typically we receive that through a complaint that comes in from a member of the community. And oftentimes there's a challenge because they're not committing a criminal offense. And what do we do with the individuals? And what we're seeing with part of this program allows us to work with our nonprofits where it isn't necessarily a criminal exposure to the justice system, and we're able to actually connect them with appropriate resources that would benefit them. And then it's not like a one-time stop because once they're in this program for us, we're going to continue to return to speak to those individuals and hopefully provide them with the resources so that they can become successful and we resolve that community issue.
Thank you. All right,
Excuse me, Natalie, before you proceed, and then let me just say, I really appreciate this format where you've got some real life scenarios and you're giving us real answers to real questions. But I just want to go back to the first one. I think Aaron did a great job of, because this question comes up all the time, right? I mean, there are folks that encounter, maybe someone in the line at the grocery store, and you find out she's, a single mom and she got kids in the car, she's homeless, or you're involved in a church group and someone knocks on the door. And I mean, there's a million scenarios where people in our community are interacting with homeless folks and want to be a resource or want to refer them to the right place to get help. And I think the answer to this first question that you presented is community bridges, right? I mean, what we want to avoid, and I've heard you say this in the past, is we don't want to have wrong doors, right? Where people are knocking on a door that's not going to be able to help them. And I just want to make sure that we're clear that our first line of defense, it sounds like in these situations, is to refer those situations to community bridges. And is that the first step? And if so, is there like a phone number that we're going to start blasting out, or how do people make that referral?
Mayor, that's a fantastic question. Currently, what we do is we modified our model to where we have 2 navigators now from community bridges at Paz de Cristo, where folks that are experiencing homelessness traditionally go for showers, for evening meal and such. And they're there from noon till 7 p.m. And they are the funnel to get into the housing programs. They have connections to the East Valley Men's Shelter, the Housing Hub. They do the VI SPDAT. They do all the acuity assessment, and they triage there. And then they can funnel them out to the motel or whatever programs that they qualify for, depending on what their particular situation is. So that really is the gateway. And the good thing about that is that's where a lot of our services are already provided. So getting them there where the services are provided and then having that pass through has been very successful thus far.
So if we encounter a situation like this and it's not at pause, it's out it's in the park, it's in a parking lot, it's wherever, what can all the nice people in Mesa that want to help, make a connection, how do they get that family or that individual connected to Community Bridges so that they can make the referral and get them into a motel room? They
have their community or connection to service number, which is an 800 number. But the difficulty is with capacity and with different people's needs, you have to have that sit down with the person. If there's an emergency situation, particularly with law enforcement, we have the motel rooms where that happens right that minute. With community members, we have to kind of sift through and figure out exactly what the particular needs are and how they qualify. Because there's a lot of different paths in as well as out of homelessness.
So, Mayor.
So would it be the non-emergency number for the police department? Is that the best place to start?
I think the very best place to start, Mayor, is just get them to Paz de Cristo. That is, if we don't know exactly what their whole story is, if we don't know what they qualify for, get them to Paz de Cristo, because the Community Bridges will go through every single question. We'll ask them about, what's happening in their life. We'll figure out exactly what is a best fit for them and needs for them, and then connect them to those services. So. I think a message right now is to connect people to Paz de Cristo. I've had several people call me and say, what do I do? I'm willing to take them wherever I need to take them. And I tell them, take them to Paz. So it's a perfect first step. It's a very personal one. They'll feel cared for. They'll get immediate help. And it's a great way for us to really figure out how we can help them.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and move into the...
I'm sorry, Natalie. Councilmember Duff has a question as well.
So along those lines, I often get concerns of people who find homeless that are more of a nuisance, whether where they live, in a parking lot, whatever, that they feel is a hindrance to, resuming life, and they're concerned. So we tell them to call the non-emergency number. Would that be the best avenue? And then when they call the non-emergency number, it's usually a very long response. And I understand it is not life-threatening, but if they're the kids are going to school and it's in the parking lot and it's having impact on that situation for a duration, sometimes days. So would it be possible to have some kind of hotline number or something that goes to PD that is just addressing homelessness, so it doesn't get in clogging up the PD, the public safety things, and being able to be directed to those who can address the homeless situation, the officers in the community, the navigators, whoever, instead of routing it through police who have to route it out into those people who can assist? Is there something to be more efficient? I feel a lot of frustration from our residents.
Councilmember Duff, thank you for that question. I'm not certain if a hotline number into PD would be effective. Quite frankly, all of these calls that come in will be prioritized based on the information that we receive. If an individual calls related to an emergent concern related to homeless individuals, as you mentioned, it's causing a safety concern for children on their way to school. Certainly those are prioritized much higher and a dispatch would be made much sooner. But particularly note is those calls should still come into our non-emergency line, because at each of our divisions, we do have a community action officer whose one of their primary functions is to respond to those community concerns. Particular after the call has been dispatched to a patrol officer, they follow up with those community members in hopes of resolving those issues long-term. So it would be our recommendation that we continue to use the 644-2211 non-emergency line. And there are times when our response is longer than people would prefer. But if there is a concern for safety at the moment, those are immediately dispatched at a much higher level, and the response by our patrol officers would be much quicker based on that given scenario.
And Councilmember Duff, I just wanted to add, on a non-police number on the city's website on reducing homelessness, we have the CBI Path number, which is a 24-hour team that CBI has that will go out and contact people in the field. So if citizens called that number and said, hey, there's this person living in this area that needs contact, they will send navigators directly out to that location. And to the mayor's question, that might be an answer to that for that number as well. So if it may not be a police matter, or if it might take too long because of the priority for police, that might be another option. But again, I think there's 5 path navigators from Maricopa County, so it will take some time for them to get connected to Mesa as well.
And Councilmember Duff, if I could just ask one thing. One of the things that we experience with a lot of calls that you mentioned is that the individual called tell us that they don't want contact. And so it's an anonymous caller, essentially. What we do ask is that folks, when they do call for the scenario that you described, that they demand contact, that they ask that our officers stop and speak to them so that they can express the long-term concern that we're dealing with. That also does prompt, I think, a better and a quicker response when we have a call taker who wants contact by their police department.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, go forward.
Okay. So I'm going to go to the last 3 questions. I'm going to ask Aaron to go through them. We had this individual situation just recently where we had someone at Mesa City Plaza loudly complaining, had several nuisance types of complaints, made people feel nervous. He wasn't doing anything illegal, and so I want to have Aaron talk about what we did in that situation.
So yeah, in these situations, you have to determine whether or not the person's exercising their right to free speech or if their conduct is disorderly and disturbing the peace. And so in this situation, we had Officer Reyes, who's stationed at the at 20 East Main at Mesa City Plaza, contact him multiple times. And our ultimate goal in every police contact is voluntary compliance. If we can gain voluntary compliance without having to take enforcement action, I think everybody's life is better. And so a couple of voluntary compliance contacts were made with them, and ultimately a discussion about how his behavior was getting to the point of disorderly conduct and disturbing other people's peace. He changed his behavior, and it no longer became an issue. And I think that situation is has been resolved since then.
The next one is, let's say somebody is in our Off the Streets program and they are not following the rules. This is what we would call sometimes our negative exit. I'm going to have Aaron talk to you about that.
So it varies because the violations can vary. There's fairly strict regulations and rules at the motel. There's hourly room checks. There's curfews. If they don't open the door and let the room get checked a couple times, then they're going to be in a violation. And depending on what the violation is, they could get permanently exited. They could get 3 days out. They could get a warning. It depends on what their violation is. We're trying to make it so that everybody can succeed. So we're not going to, kick everybody out the very first infraction they have. So we go through case by case. It's staffed, and some of it is, you take the whole situation into account. You have a 22-year-old female with a 1-week-old child, and there's a violation. You're not going to kick her out at midnight, right? You're going to look for other means to try and get compliance and process and get their needs met so that they're not in violation any longer. So we have to kind of go through case by case and staff each of these to try and find the best outcome. Because ultimately we don't want them back on the streets in a negative fashion.
And then the last question really is about mental health and behavioral health issues, which is becoming a much bigger concern across the entire country, and especially during COVID. So maybe Aaron could talk about how we connect people to those services here. Yeah,
so as you know, mental illness is oftentimes interwoven with what we view as homelessness, co-occurring with other issues such as substance abuse and things. So Community Bridges themselves has a significant mental health background, and so their back office suite of programs, it's easy to plug into those, as well as the Mesa Police Department's crisis response team. There's been multiple times where we've had to reach out to the crisis response team, which works with closely with the care providers, and they can reach out to the case managers for people to make sure that they're getting the appropriate level of care. Their case manager may not have enough touch with this particular person. We can kind of motivate through the appropriate channels them to get a better level of care, which gets a better response and less crisis for that person, and ultimately less negative behavior.
So Mayor and Council, let me jump in on this one because probably separate from this group, I have had specific conversations with both the police and fire chief, and I have requested that they, working together, come up with a proposal that we can bring to City Council to develop a behavioral health response team that would not necessarily require sworn officers to be part of that in order to de-escalate the situation and to bring in behavioral health practitioners and experts to be part of that response. This is a trend that is now going across the country in many large cities that have to deal with mental health behavior, and we have been doing that. We do that all the time, but now today we send a patrol officer, we may end up with an EMT, but most cities across the country are recognizing that may not be the appropriate level of response or the right kind of response. And so I have challenged our public safety folks by the end of the year to come to council, so we can come to council to identify the additional resources that we're going to need to bring in behavioral health experts who would be in a position to go and respond to a lot of these situations. Even just recently, the incident in Philadelphia started out as a mental health incident, but then resulted in having to call in the police department and patrol officers responding to someone in a violent manner. But there are many instances, we believe, where mental health, if we respond with the right type of expertise, we can de-escalate the situation. So again, as I said, many cities are looking at this. I know the city of Phoenix is looking at this, but across the country, we are learning of other approaches. We do have we've tried a variety of different approaches, both in the fire department and the police, but we believe it's time now to really have a very specific response team that is trained specifically in behavioral health, and they're not coming with weapons or even medical training. They are coming as behavioral health experts to deal with the situation. So we hope to bring something to you before the end of this year.
So, Mayor and Council, at the end of the day, and as the mayor talked about, we really do want to have this no wrong door approach. So if citizens or the council feel like there's an emergency and public safety is at risk, we say dial 911. If they feel like police intervention is still important because there could be some danger there, please call, but there's no immediate emergency. The non-emergency number works for us. If they feel that they want to get someone out there to help someone and have an in-the-field contact with them, the Community Bridges Path Hotline is the way to go. And I think it's a great idea to start publishing that more and more frequently. And so we will include that in our communications process. And if somebody is out there and they encounter a homeless individual or family and they want to get them help and they're willing to take them wherever they need to take them, Paz de Cristo is the answer. That is the gateway to services. And our hope would be that any of our nonprofits who have people that bring families or individuals to them would also then access Paz or any of these other services that I just talked about. In addition to, they have direct contact to Aaron Rain out in the field.
Thank you. Great presentation. I know I suspect we've got a few questions. I know I have some. Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Natalie, for the presentation. I get irritated sometime when we start talking about the entire homeless issue. It seems like ever since Martin Boise was decided, that all of a sudden we put on kids gloves and we're really sort of treating the homeless people differently than we treat our own citizens. Sometimes better, it feels. Our citizens over the years have spent millions of dollars on park bonds and so forth, and maintenance and so forth for our parks, and we can't even use them. There's a lot of people that are afraid to take their kids to the parks because there's needles that are laying out there. There's feces, human feces out there. It's sad that our citizens are paying for services that they're not able to use and receive because of the homeless. And I think we have to take a little stronger approach, take the kid gloves off, and let's take a little bit of a stronger approach, and let's make some pushes. I know that we have to be compassionate, and I know we're a compassionate community, but at some point in time, we just can't keep inviting more and more homeless in, putting them in a hotel, and trying to change their pathway. I know Mark Young and I spoke about this, many times, and sometimes it's, we felt that the best way to stop the homelessness issue was to stop it on the front end, stop people from becoming homeless first, because once they become homeless, it's much harder to get them out of that scenario than it is to try to keep them in their home. And I mean, I would seriously love to see more funding put towards those types of programs than I would putting people in hotel rooms temporarily that may or may not make it through the program and may or may not end up returning back to a park that our citizens now are, again, afraid to go and visit with their children. I mean, what are we going to do? I mean, at some point in time, we have to take a tougher stance. I mean, it's that tough love scenario that we use with our own kids sometimes, right? So, I mean, at what point in time are we going to say enough's enough? Yes, there's, Martin v. Boise, but we're not just going to sit back and allow the homeless to take over our community and take over all of the services in our city.
So, Mayor, Councilman Thompson, I guess let's be clear. Martin v. Boise, we can't enforce any of these trespassing or urban camping unless we have a place available as an option. The courts have made it very clear that's why we have been fortunate enough during the last 7 months with the additional CARES dollars to be able to identify the rooms so that we can meet that obligation and then allow us to enforce it. Without the enforcement, without the hotel rooms, we would not be able to allow the police officers to go and approach the homeless and enforce the laws regarding urban camping. We would be without that ability. And so this method, this approach of having a place for them to go, and that's why we're recommending using the ESG, is just an obligation we have, and certainly we can let the city attorney talk to it, but that is a requirement for all cities now. In order to enforce, we have to first have an option to place them. What you say be more aggressive, I think we can have the police department talk about the conversations I've had about asking them to go through and check all the parks frequently, and if people are outside the hours of when they can be in a park, we're going to enforce it. We've used community court as a way to create other options for individuals to avoid payments or jail time, but certainly we can stop doing the community court, and the other option, frankly, is we just take them to the jail and we enforce the code that way. So we need to have that kind of direction. We agree, and we're committing more resources, whether it's through technology or manpower, to have presence in our parks. But the difficulty is, unless they are violating a law, and there's no rule against being in a park and looking different than everybody else and sleeping on a bench or whatever, we can't enforce that. We can ask for if they need help. We can, offer to help someone, and then we can offer the resources we have. But I think sometimes I understand people could feel uncomfortable in that situation, but I don't know that we have the ability to stop someone who we may profile as being homeless, that we can enforce that if it's the same time everybody else is in the park. But we need the hotel rooms in order to enforce. That is essential for us, because otherwise we rely on the beds from, who has the other beds, Aaron, that we were relying on before, and how many were there?
East Valley Men's Shelter.
Yeah. And we know how, East Valley Men's Shelter, we know we've had complaints about having that as the only location to take individuals. And so this way we've been able to spread out and have a location now on the far east side.
Thank you. And again, I know we've got several questions, but maybe before we leave the topic of ways to increase the family-friendly atmosphere in the parks, Natalie, are we not working on an ordinance or on some proposed changes to the way we regulate the parks in terms of providing social services there, or maybe allowing shopping carts, or to what extent can we, legally maybe apply some beefed up rules to our parks?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We are looking at this. We had been asked to look at what the city of Phoenix is doing, and when we've found at this point no evidence of any rules that they've put into place. They are working very hard at a state and level on health-related codes and things like that, but at this point, they really use more of their guidelines and code of conduct at their park to regulate things. The city of Tucson has done some of that, and so we're taking a look at what they are doing, and we're really benchmarking and looking across the country on this particular issue. We know that, especially during the holidays, and probably because of COVID today, there's going to be a lot of people that care deeply, and we have such a caring community of Mesa, and they want to help. And so what we want to do is point them in a better direction to help. And so we will be using a lot of communication tactics to help them understand how they can help people in a way that's better for everyone. And so we'll be doing that. But we're also taking a look at that specific issue as it relates to legal abilities, and we expect to come back to the City Council with some more information at the beginning of 2021.
Great, thank you. Mr. Luna.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. First of all, Natalie, thank you for that great presentation. I really learned a lot about that. I certainly understand Mr. Thompson's concern. I do have to tell you that my niece came from Phoenix, saw some great pictures of the different parks we had in Mesa, and went to one of our parks and was horrified to see the amount of homeless people were there. And, it's difficult for our community when they go to parks and there's a lot of homeless. They're afraid. I understand that, and I appreciate that. But I also am appreciative that we're fortunate to have the ability to house our homeless in these motels. And so, so I want to congratulate you for that. Do what you can. I know because of the laws, the current federal law, that we are limited in terms of enforcement. We can do what we can. But I do want to point out something that Mr. Brady indicated, and that was having some kind of social service personnel, mental health personnel, working in cooperation with our law enforcement. My nephew in the Seattle area is participating in a pilot program, where they send the social service personnel to deal with the homeless individual to try to see what the issue is. And many times it's a mental health issue. And so they're able to work through that so that it doesn't become an enforcement issue. It's just trying to provide this individual with the resources. It's not everyone, but it's a good start. And so I'm supportive of doing something like that. I think that's probably a good move as we look at working for our homeless. And thanks, Natalie, for pointing out about Paz de Cristo. So if there's an individual that is in crisis, to point them to there to get the resources they need. But I do want to thank our community partners. Again, I see Jackie Taylor, I see Mark Young. I know Anu Leaf has been very active in this, Community Bridges. I do want to thank them. They've been our safety net of our community and have done a yeoman's job. The fact that our homelessness has doubled during this pandemic is tragic, but the fact that we have additional dollars to support our community, we're very fortunate we do have them available. So thank you, Natalie, Aaron, and your team, as well as Chief Wessing, and all that you do for our community. But so those are my comments relative to that.
Thank you, Mr. Luna. Vice Mayor Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, after hearing this presentation and some of the comments from my colleagues, you know, every council member has a homeless issue in our respective districts, and we're working hard with our public safety personnel to help mitigate that. You know, in the programs, here's where I'm at. If we're spending money on these programs, we need to know what programs are effective or not. And if they're not effective, they're not doing the job, then we need to be nimble and we need to be able to move into another arena. And Mr. Brady, I get that. You know, these programs, I'm supportive of all of them that we have currently in place, but we need to be more looking broad at all the issues. And then I have, you know, some of the pictures you took here. I took those pictures that you have on one of these last slides because of the homelessness issue under the 101 freeway. I was with our CAT officer, Detective Cause, and it was horrendous, and the health standards there. But here's one of the things that I think that really bugs people. So, and it bugs me is, so if I show up at the park with my shopping cart, my dog, my luggage, my bicycle, food, clothing, and bedding, and I hang out at the park, I'm not breaking any laws. So, you know, you can extrapolate how you want, but this is why we need to change our ordinances to be responsive to the changing needs in our community, because we need to make our parks, our public-owned facilities safe, not only for the homeless, but for every constituent, every person that comes in and out of our city safe. And so I advocate for some stronger ordinances to manage our times for our public properties. And we need to do this either through community court and through our nonprofits, or sometimes jail time works for some individuals, but we need to help people and have the resources available. And there's some additional tools for collaboration that might not even be need any funding, and that's our faith-based organizations. There's jobs and mentoring, and these faith-based organizations will pay for people to get a job, even technical education, and for long-term employment. So I don't think we've even explored that component. But I do want to ask the question, and I kind of preempted Natalie earlier this morning, but some of the issues, like you're saying, how are our neighboring communities, our cities and towns doing? And
Do you want to talk?
how is their participation? Are they leveraging their assets into our resources in our community? And I don't expect an answer, Natalie, but is that something that we're going to look at in the future about how other cities and communities can collaborate and take care of their own issues? Or are we manage that in our community? So Natalie, if you could answer that, I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure, Mayor, Vice Mayor. We are working with the East Valley cities. All of the cities and towns have come to the table and have been talking about that particular issue. We have decided just most recently that we need more direction from our governing bodies who respond on behalf of the communities. We need to understand where each of the governing bodies are coming from. So in a few weeks, I'll be coming back to City Council and asking a few questions that every city in the region is going to be asking their governing bodies, so that we can then come back together with more information about how we can move forward in solutions and together. So we're hopeful that that could help us make some progress in the regional discussion.
All right. Mayor, I think that's all I have. Thank you very much and for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. And And to speak to your point, I know everyone on this screen, and I'm looking at it, has been involved in this, and like you, has been pressuring staff to help us make some progress on this. So thank you for your efforts. Councilmember Duff.
Yes, thank you. As much as we've been experiencing doubling of homelessness from 2018 to 2019 and going, and over this past year, we're facing October 31st as a deadline for the eviction moratorium to lift. And we're going to see it escalate dramatically from here on out. And I know we've been doing a lot of assistance for rentals and utilities and everything like that. I would like just to reiterate for the public, if you know of anybody who is facing eviction or just evicted, the number to call, what they should do in order to have that safety net. I just want to be clear and for all of us in our community to be advocates. There's so many who are deeply impacted by the pandemic economically, and we all need to work together in being a point of resource to get through it. And that point, and then the other thing on Operation Off the Streets, I wanted to understand that just a little bit more. Is this more of a reactive approach? Let's say someone needs to call, and then someone goes out and talks to the individual that needs assistance, or do we have people on the street that are going up to people who appear homeless and saying, just starting a conversation and trying to make them aware of what we have to encourage them to seek it instead of maybe just put up with wherever they are and, whether on a bench or in the park or in the neighborhoods or just walking or, this. Are we doing anything on the outreach, or are we just waiting for people to make a call and notify them if it becomes a nuisance?
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, I'll try to answer that specifically with Operation Off the Streets. We're not waiting for a call to respond to our areas where, my officers are very aware of the particular areas in their divisions where homeless typically congregate. And so as part of this program is, as a normal enforcement strategy, they are going out and making their own contacts. This is completely unrelated to a complaint or a call that comes in. Now, to the calls that do come in, we still are answering those as we normally would, including when council members' offices contact us from constituent concerns. Those are part of the program, but no, we're not waiting for a call to come in. It is really a directed enforcement response across the entire city, and it's continuing through to the end of the year, where as part of their enforcement strategy, as part of their day-to-day operations, we are asking our officers to go out and scour the parks, scour the alleys, those water retention areas where we know that our residents like to recreate. Also our businesses, our light rail platforms that are impacted by the issues. That is part of their enforcement strategies when they're not on other calls for service. So it's a combined effort, but it's directed versus reactionary as you described.
And Councilmember Duff, just to add, dovetailing with that, the number that Lieutenant McCleary brought up earlier, the 3,700, that was the ones that officers had gone out and sought out and on their own proactively made connections with. And I believe 1,500 of those were offered services and some level of judicial involvement. And to Councilmember Thompson's point, 1,100, almost 1,200 were just simply arrested. So there's 1,200 people that probably wouldn't think they were dealt with kit gloves, but that's a higher level of involvement than normal. So they're actually going out and seeking contact on a consensual basis, or if there's a criminal offense, then engage in that.
I appreciate the work that you and your team and all of PD has done. Has made a tremendous impact. I don't think as a community we realize the enormity that homelessness has increased, and we're seeing it more, but the amount of people that you have assisted and taken off the streets is enormous. And I praise you for all the work that you do. And it's a tireless job. And I can't say enough good things, and I know we're admired by other cities. But for us to do something about homelessness, all of us have to be engaged as far as residents and knowing the best ways to react, appreciate your work, and then, you know, as far as our policy and what we're doing in the housing and what Natalie's strategic plan is addressing. So I know we're all doing our part, and we all need to be engaged and take responsibility with making that difference for those who are homeless and for the quality of life in our community. The other question I had is, do we have enough affordable rentals that we can refer once they get down on the strategic diagram, on the phase where they're ready for housing and housing assistance? Do we have enough to refer them into? Is that still a problem?
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, yes, that will always, that's a challenge. And it is something that we'll be talking with the City Council about as we come forward in the Housing Master Plan. So I think if you talk to our nonprofit partners, they will tell you the same and echo the problem. Again, this is not just a Mesa issue. This is a national issue. There are lots of cities out there that are trying to find ways to create more affordable and quality developments. And the thing that that we've heard very clearly in our community is the need to spread them geographically throughout Mesa. And so those are types of things and paths forward that we're looking at, but it's definitely something we need to continue to grow.
Great. I look forward to our conversations in our housing and how we can assist in that in different ways. And I just wanted to acknowledge what Mr. Brady brought up about having trained people who are to deal with those who have in mental health crisis, to be able to go out and address that instead of our police officers, and expanding that and looking what we can do to make our community safer and help those who are in that kind of need. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Duff. Councilmember Heredia.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. You know, I would echo just the comments that most of my council members, council colleagues had, you know, on the mental health teams. I think that is a great tool that we can use on not only this issue, but I think other issues that, you know, other calls that are coming in in our neighborhoods and communities. And I know the fire department has had such a team or a similar team responding to calls and been fairly successful in their contact with our residents. The other piece on the issue around regional support, and I think most of, if not all of our colleagues have been part of conversations at the county level, at the state level, at the national level, talk about homelessness, and I think we hear a lot of communities that, you know, are sympathetic, compassionate on this issue, but at the end of the day, it seems like there's still a lot of silo work happening within our cities, and I think maybe rethinking of how we look at these regional partnerships, these state partnerships, how funding flows into these cities in providing support services for homelessness, looking at contractual agreements with other cities, you know, maybe an automatic aid, you know, around East Valley cities, or, you know, ideas that we you know, all of our surrounding cities can really, you know, put not only funding, but some other kind of contractual piece to support each other maybe something of those nature strategies. We need to rethink on how we evolve on these strategies as a region to support the Phoenix, the Tempe, and Mesa, who have always, I think, taken the lead on these on this issue and really support this. So, I would love to have those types of conversations on an ongoing basis, and I'm really looking at and pressuring the whole region and the state to figure out more concrete strategies to look at regional support for this issue. And so with that, I also wanted to say thank you for the staff and working hard, our nonprofit community. This is a tough issue. It's something that we will keep on having to work on and figuring out what are the best strategies to take on, and to the point of the multifaceted approach of this issue, looking at how we prevent, like Councilmember Thompson mentioned, how we prevent people from coming into homelessness. I think we need to keep on looking at those strategies. How do we look at the current homeless population and support those services? It's going to be an ongoing challenge, but looking at how we can tackle multiple sides of this issue so that we can prevent, and then if folks already are in that situation, how do we get them out as best as possible and moving forward. So thank you everybody for the hard work, and I'm sure we'll keep on trying to figure this out and figure out solutions to this issue.
Thank you, Frankie. I'm going to echo the gratitude that's been expressed by this council. I know that Natalie and Aaron and Chief Wessing and Mark Young and Jackie Taylor and all the folks that are participating in this, this has been your life's work, every day for a long time. So I think it is important that we acknowledge that Mesa is a very compassionate community. We all ought to be proud of our city's response. But I also am excited that we now have a strategic plan to go forward. But this plan is only good if we can implement it and we follow it and it's useful to us. So it's a great chart, but as Councilmember Duff indicated a moment ago, it seems like, and Natalie, I think you said this, we may have some holes in our chart. For example, the Bridge to Success housing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that we don't have that right now. Is that right? And if so, that seems like something that we need to prioritize. and it's not good to have a chart if one of the legs in that chart is a hole.
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay, so I guess I would suggest that we need to put this back on the agenda or continue the conversation as to what can we do to fill that void in this pathway to success, so that we can, and I'm just restating the obvious, it's already been stated, but let's not lose sight of the fact that our strategic plan has a hole in it.
And Mayor, just
yes.
Quickly, I think one of the reasons we wanted to provide the strategic plan and make sure the council is endorsing it, because the way we are able to maybe address this is that we use the funds that come from the federal government to address these types of uses. But unless we have a nonprofit provider who's willing to recognize this is a priority and step up and offer these services, it doesn't happen. If all we have are proposals to do other important social services, but not directly related to this part of the homeless, then we are kind of left without options. And so part of this exercise too is to begin sending a message to our nonprofit community is we need partners who are going to help us with these parts of the plan, so that when we go through the application process, we will have strong proposals that can assist us in making this happen. So part of this is, in a way, for council to send a message to the nonprofit community that this is where we need your help, and this is where we expect to provide or to award the funding for these types of services.
That's great to hear. So I guess we need to put out the word that in our discretionary funding of nonprofits going forward, there's a specific item that we're looking for, so that the great organizations that are doing such good work in our community realize that they need to help us fill that hole. And to that point, Natalie, the next question I had for you is on the chart, on the housing path to recovery chart, I'd be interested in knowing what is the capacity that we currently have in our community for each of those steps out of homelessness. And you and I have talked about this as well, but I'm wondering who is it that is tracking the metrics of that? If we've got 10 or 12 nonprofits that are the boots on the ground that are accomplishing these things, who is it that's coordinating? Are we having a meeting where the 10 or 12 get together and we're talking about who the individuals are and how many people are in a certain spot, and are they making progress? Are they stagnant? Are they backsliding? We need to have metrics, and we need to have accountability for how people are progressing through that. Can you respond to that a little bit?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. At a very high level, I'll just give you a sense of the numbers that we have for each of those steps. But again, it is high level. For the emergency shelter, which is basically our hotel rooms, we'll have somewhere between 100 and 150 at any given time beds kind of available for that purpose. For our recovery and jobs shelter, the 3 to 6 month sheltering, we have around 200 in Mesa. We have a definite gap when it comes to the Bridge to Success, and thank you for your feedback on that, and we will be bringing more information forward as we get proposals and include those kinds of requests when we bring federal funding forward. For affordable housing, that is something that is a very difficult thing to measure. Just in things like our Section 8 vouchers or La Mesita and Escobedo and, our senior housing downtown and El Rancho and our VASH vouchers. Those are the kinds of things where we have probably somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 that I can just point to. Mesa has other opportunities for affordability throughout our city as well. So that is by no means comprehensive, but it's an area that we need to continue to focus on and build on and get a little more clarity around. And so that is basically what we have. The metrics, right now, the tool that we have at our disposal are our contracts with our nonprofits when we're providing federal dollars for these types of purposes. And what we do is in their contracts, we ask them to document their Mesa-based response. How many people in Mesa are they serving with the funds that they're being provided and for the project that they have proposed. And so we do that in the contract, and then because federal dollars are all on a reimbursement basis, when they request reimbursement, we ask for very specific metrics. So today, those metrics are housed in our housing department. And again, we need to do a better job of helping the community understand those. We will probably expand our metrics as we move forward, but that is one place right now that we do, and we'll continue exploring other avenues with our data portal.
Thank you. I don't think we're going to get better at this until we are measuring it so that we know if we're getting better or worse. So I would appreciate having a contact, knowing who it is at the housing office or at a New Leaf or whoever is going to, have the responsibility for being the metrics person, and occasionally, if not regularly, getting a report saying we're seeing, a fluctuation in one of these groups. And for example, today was the first day I've heard, and I love it, that our goal is for folks to not live in affordable housing permanently. our goal is for them to progress out of affordable housing. And I don't know that we've really ever, I don't know how we're doing on that. I think there's a lot of families that are multi-generational in affordable housing. And so I'm curious to know if there is turnover in our affordable housing because people are, there's success stories out there and people are moving into market rate housing and their situation is improving. So similarly, I'd like to know, do we have more than enough capacity or less than enough capacity in these different buckets that we've put into this plan? So yeah, that's something I'll look forward to talking to you more about. But again, I would like for us to have accountability to the voters that are contributing millions of dollars to this plan. I think we need to be able to measure its success. A couple other questions. Again, I know that the principles and strategies that this plan relies on is also based on regional cooperation. And I think we need to continue to talk about what's the best way to invite that. There might be, at some point, I know informally in staff meetings and in regional city manager meetings and elected official meetings, we need to raise this issue and invite our regional partners to be regional partners on this topic. But at some point, if we don't see a willingness to do that, we're going to need to make some decisions that might provoke a response from our partners. So I'm curious. I'm anxious to continue to have the conversation as strategically, what's the best way to invite regional participation in this plan. And then finally, I'll note that I think I'm out of everything we've talked about here today. It's very clear to me that the community court system is really ultimately, in my mind, our best hope of making progress in this situation. When we started on the ending veterans homelessness campaign 4 or 5 years ago, the federal government came and said, here's the model we're going to require you to follow if you want to participate in this, is you're going to have a list of every homeless veteran in your community. You're going to know them by name, and you're going to have a meeting, and you're going to say, how is Mr. Smith doing? Is Mr. Smith, backsliding, or is Mr. Smith ready to move from one category to another? And I think that's a great model. It's worked in the veterans homelessness scenario. And that's really the model that people are in when they are referred into community court. It's not a one-size-fits-all. You've got folks that are working specifically with individuals, and it's proven to be successful. So I'm proud of the fact that we've caught on to that and we're utilizing that. And as Mr. Brady indicated, we also need to get much better, or just realize the obvious, which is mental health is the root cause of a lot of what we're dealing with. And as a community and as a public safety departments, we need to be better at bringing the right tools when we're called to fix a problem. So I'm excited to see how we do that, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our police chief and fire chief as to how we can perhaps change some of the models of delivery in public safety to just respond to that reality. Thank you very much. I know we have a few more comments from council members. Mr. Thompson and then Councilmember Duff.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mayor. Going back to, Mayor, your comment on the regional efforts. Natalie, I know that Tempe and Chandler have services for homeless persons. Can you speak on if the other cities and towns, Gilbert, Queen Creek, Apache Junction, Scottsdale, do they offer the same supportive services or any services? I'm trying to figure out what is their incentive to participate if they're not having the issues that we're having.
So Mayor, Councilmember Thompson, we've been having that conversation very directly with our neighboring cities. Some of them do have services in their communities. Some of them work very directly with the county to provide services for their community. We do have a success most recently in the city of Scottsdale and during COVID, and the collaboration resulted in them actually securing rooms and leasing rooms in a hotel in Scottsdale and creating their own community court and working in that way. So the conversations that we are having with them are making progress and are showing results, and it's not maybe as fast as we'd like them to be, but we're having them, and we are kind of moving forward. And again, I think where we're at now, Councilmember Thompson, is a real need for the governing bodies to weigh in on this. And so we as staff members are going to be asking our governing bodies a few questions so that we can be more informed at the table as we decide next steps moving forward. So we'll be coming back to you with that same conversation. And then we'll be coming back to you with here's where we're headed and how we can use your help.
Thank you, Councilmember Duff.
Yes, I'm very concerned about what we can do immediately. I know we need to work on a regional plan. I know we need to figure that out and get it and everything, but I know that that's going to take time for us to do that. So for right now, what are some of the things that we can do to alleviate the onset? And I don't want to get too much into it because it starts getting into the housing issue, but you know, we don't have enough vouchers, and if we have enough vouchers, we don't have landlords that will take them. And is there any kind of incentive or anything that we can do in order for landlords to take it? Or maybe with the evictions coming up, they'll find enough need to consider taking a voucher. Also, I'd like to advocate for, I know we've talked about this before, Natalie, about creating models or helping faith-based communities facilitate home sharing. There's a lot of people who even own homes or who are renting are facing and losing those. If they could rent out a room, that would certainly help both parties. And sometimes our faith-based organizations are ones, a common place where they can, you know, coordinate those individuals who would consider that, so that we don't have two families homeless. We're helping both. And I'll mention it, and I know we'll get it more in housing, is the allowing of accessory dwelling units for those people who want to build a granny flat or, you know, the small unit on their property. How we can create quick process plans, even financial incentives if they take a voucher, and it's a way to organically absorb the people that we need to house without waiting or collecting into housing units where we have, you know, waiting for the federal funding or us to build or something, like creating and then clustering a lot of people who that need to be housed. If we can absorb it in those who need a little extra rent or being able to absorb it on the property within the neighborhoods. And some of our older homes have large properties, and I know we can do it now, but you have to go through approvals, and architecturally it's expensive to get plans drawn. It takes a long time to get them approved. There's some costs involved in whatever we can do to make that streamlined. So I just want to somehow have some conversations or some means in which we start thinking about housing in a more immediate way, as well as working into our regional solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Duff. Mr. Thompson.
I'm sorry to beat this horse again. I mean, Natalie, I just don't feel as though you answered my question. Does Gilbert, Queen Creek, and Apache Junction have the services that Mesa has to help the homeless population?
No.
And if they don't,
Yeah,
what incentive do they have to participate?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I think, or Councilor Thompson, it'd be hard for us to say definitively what they do or they don't do for any of the cities, but certainly in the regional.
Well, Chris, we've been working with them for over a year.
No, I would say
And,
we've been talking.
Right?
There's been a lot of talk.
Okay, so
But there has not been any commitment by any of the cities. There's a lot of.
right, so in discussions, have they never brought up whether they have the services the supported services
No.
for the homeless community?
Apache Junction has opened their arms up several times. They have offered to be part of the solution. And I know they've been in conversations with the county about how they could be available to assist in that area. The other communities have not necessarily, and I want to be careful, they haven't spoken up one way or the other from the staff perspective. I have seen comments from political leaders that are concerning to me about only relying upon nonprofits to provide that solution. There are many of the communities around us that believe that this is not necessarily the role of the municipality, but it's more what they've relied upon is the response from nonprofits. So whether or not that's a successful model or not, we don't know. Our concern has been that, and Phoenix even more acutely has now made the statement that they are not going to allow the nonprofits that provide homeless service in their communities to contract out with other communities to provide those services in the city of Phoenix. We've also talked to our nonprofits about the idea that our concern about bringing in individuals from other communities to be housed in Mesa is not our preference. We've expressed the same concern to the county, which at times has rented rooms in Mesa that have housed individuals from other communities. Frankly, to be honest, it's very difficult for cities to have this conversation one-on-one with other cities because there's very little leverage that we have or jurisdiction that we have to kind of put everybody in the room and make everybody step up and take a responsibility. My opinion, it's my opinion only, it needs to come from the county. It needs to come from a jurisdiction that can make those decisions and say, this is the plan for the entire region. And each region or each part of the region is going to have this responsibility, and we're going to just make it happen. Now, I don't know that that's politically feasible, but that's really the only level of government in the region that has the ability and frankly has the charge for both mental health jurisdiction and frankly receives a significant amount of resources directly related to homelessness. So we're trying to do our best. We're trying to coordinate with Tempe and Phoenix and let them know everything we're doing with Off the Streets and working with our nonprofits. They seem to be pleased with that because what we're trying to send a message is we, the city of Mesa, are trying to deal with our own in Mesa and not send them to other communities. And we're now asking the same consideration of all the many adjoining cities around us. How many individuals they've brought to Mesa or sending to Mesa, we don't know. Well, we have some idea, but we've essentially now going forward said we believe at least initially everybody needs to take care of their own populations, and then hopefully eventually we can work out a better regional solution that allows us, instead of having duplicative services, we could have complementary services in different parts of the East Valley.
So Chris, is this something maybe that our intergovs can engage on with their counterparts in the other cities or with the county or even legislatively to kind of kickstart something that says we need a regional approach to solving this crisis?
I do think, I don't know that it's the.
Because Mesa's not going to do it on its own.
It needs, and I think the mayor can speak to this, I think it needs to come from the political side. It needs to come from, mayors and supervisors who kind of need to have some very difficult conversations politically. I think they're starting, because I think Phoenix is, I don't want to speak for Phoenix, but based on their conversations, they don't want to be the location to treat all of the homeless in the entire area, and I think they're starting to make that known more clearly. So at some point, these communities are going to have to find other options. So I think it needs to be almost at the highest level, because city managers are talking, but at the end of the day, we're all looking at each other saying, this is how our community feels, and the communities that are not, as a city, providing these services and are only relying upon the nonprofits, that is their political, that is the direction they've gotten from their policymakers. They are not as a staff providing those services directly.
Okay.
You know, and I can follow up on that as well. There was a tremendous amount of momentum on this topic right before COVID hit. You may recall there was there was a big zoning case in downtown Phoenix involving the cash shelter, and Phoenix was very rightfully complaining about the fact that they've been doing the heavy lifting in the county. You know, that's been the model is, and Mesa has contributed to this. You know, where we sent our kind of our hardcore homeless to Phoenix, to the cash shelter. Now, to a lesser extent, Mesa's another example of that. You know, the other cities, and particularly in the East Valley, have looked at Mesa as the big brother that's responsible for, you know, providing these services, and they choose to take the position that they don't have this problem. So that's the situation that was about to provoke, I think, some meaningful changes right before COVID hit. And then COVID hit, and everyone has understandably been just putting out fires. and the good part about COVID is it also came with some money to provide services. So that, in my mind, and maybe Natalie and others can correct me if I don't see it correctly, but that we've been you know, dealing with the immediate situation, you know, for the last 6 to 8 months related to COVID. But I think it's now time to circle back and say, okay, going forward, you know, what is going to be the model that we're going to follow? So that's why I appreciate staff presenting today this strategic model, the strategic plan for homelessness. Obviously, as we've talked about, it's a good plan, but it needs some help, you know, before it can become effective. And one of the things that needs to happen is we need to have an understanding with our regional partners as to what they can and can't expect from the city of Phoenix and what they can and can't expect from the city of Mesa. So as I think everyone has said, it's time for everyone to make very clear what they're going to do and not do when it comes to regional cooperation. So we'll have those conversations. I know that our city managers have been meeting on this regularly. And at a staff level, I think we have a good understanding. But at some point, and I think Mr. Brady, correct me if I'm wrong, we've also talked with some of our big nonprofits, and we've said if you want to continue to receive funding from the city of Mesa, we're going to need you to focus on providing services to Mesa people, and they've agreed to do that. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor.
So we are making progress on this, but again, it's going to our neighbors are going to have some decisions to make because at some point. Well, just like the model we saw in the city of Phoenix, where they said, we're not going to just take everyone's people going forward, the same policy is going to be in effect in Mesa. And that's, like I said, going to need to provoke some changes of attitude in some of our partners, our regional partners. So I would love it for that to be a collaborative, friendly coming together. But at some point, sooner than later, I think we've got to have a model that we can rely on because neither Phoenix nor Mesa can afford to just be the big brothers that take care of everybody else's problems. All right, well, again, thank you. This is, I don't think we solved this issue today, but I think we made progress. So again, let me just express my appreciation to everyone who is working on this on a daily, hourly basis. I'm anxious for us to have a plan that we can implement that's going to make some meaningful progress on this topic. And I think we made some important steps towards that today. Natalie or Mr. Brady, anything else to add to this topic?
No, thank you, Mayor. As you said, Mayor, we recognize there's more to come, and we'll be back with some further discussions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brady, the court update, are we postponing that agenda item?
Judge Tatz was not able to make it this morning, Mayor, so we will reschedule him for a future date.
All right, thank you. And then and again, I think to Chief Westling and Mark and Jackie and Aaron and Natalie, thank you for your presentation. And I know this will become a fairly regular topic of conversation. The next item on our agenda is to acknowledge receipt of minutes of various boards and committees. Is there a motion to that effect? Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Thompson. We'll do a roll call vote. Vice Mayor Freeman, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Duff.
Aye.
Thank you, Councilmember Luna.
Aye.
Thank you, Councilmember Heredia.
Aye.
Thank you, Councilmember Whitaker. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. We got you. Councilmember Thompson. Thank you. I also read lips there, so I think we're good. I vote aye as well, so that passes unanimously. The next item on our agenda is the current event summary, including meetings and conferences attended. Council, I know you've been busy. Who would like to begin? Councilmember Duff.
Yes, yes, we've been busy. I'd like to let everybody know that the museums are reopening, the Arizona Natural History Museum and the IDEA Museum. They're opening to members this weekend and to the general public next weekend. The council, some of us went on a tour to see the new interactions, the new activities, and no-touch environments. They've been done phenomenally well in being very innovative and creating activities that are very engaging and are safe too. So I encourage everybody to get out and to the museums. They've been closed for quite a while. I attended the virtual Dia de los Muertos virtual event over the weekend and had great music and crafts and stories. I always appreciate that and I always look forward to it every year. Over the weekend, I planned a wings of flight planning meeting for the Falcon Field's 80th anniversary, celebrating the Royal Air Force. That celebration will be November 11th of 2021, and there will be a lot of events around that, and we're just in the early phases of planning. I'm excited for that. And yesterday, I attended the LISC annual breakfast, again, a virtual event, and it's acknowledged and recognized the partners with LISC, Local Initiative Support Corporation, and U.S. Bank and Rail were recognized for their work in assisting small businesses in Mesa and along the light rail corridor. So
Thank you, Councilmember Duff. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the opportunity to help our Mesa Historical Museum at the cemetery. They had a walking tour, talked about people and what their lives were in our community. And I've attended a couple other meetings this past week, so thank you very much.
Thank you. For those who missed the cemetery tour, you missed out. That's a fascinating part of a great place to celebrate Mesa history. Council, other comments? Mr. Heredia.
Hey, thank you. I just want to give another shout out to Parks and Engineering Departments. Attended Parks Improvement virtual meeting last week, which was great feedback and questions from residents in a local park in District 3. So thank you, Parks and Engineering Department. There's also today, for those that live around the Dobson Ranch Library, there's a virtual meeting happening. You can log onto my Facebook page for information, but virtual meeting from 6 to 7 about improvements to that library coming up, and want residents' feedback and questions about those improvements. So if you're interested, log on at 6 p.m. To our virtual meeting to discuss. Also want to give a shout out to our Mesa Police Department and the Fiesta Division. They hosted a community meeting to discuss not only the terrible tragedy shooting that happened in our district a couple weeks ago, but also just hearing people's concerns and comments around that area and how we can do better. So thank you for the the police department and their staff and the chief for doing the great work there. So.
Thank you. Mr. Luna.
Yes, Mayor. I also wanted just to let people know that this coming Saturday on the afternoon of Halloween, the Mesa Public Library will be hosting its Halloween Boo. Parade starts from 2 p.m. to 3 and at all 3 locations, including the Red Mountain Branch. This year, your car is included in the fun. So show up in your favorite costume, bring a treat bag, and maybe even decorate your car. We'll have several stops to drive in our parking lot with special treats at each stop. Each car will get a family pack of books for kids that need to read. All treats and books are going to be available while supply lasts. So hopefully we'll have a lot of people attend that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Luna. Council, other comments? I just want to double down on Councilmember Duff's comments about the museums. I was able to take with several of you, walk through both the Natural History Museum and the Idea Museum in the last week to see their preparations for opening on at the end of this month. And it's really going to, I'm excited for our community to get back into the museums. But again, I think it's important that you know we're doing this in a very responsible way. If you want to take your kids to the museum, you need to call ahead, make reservations. It's done in small groups. I think you'll really appreciate a lot of the safeguards that are built into how we can open a museum in the middle of a pandemic. It's being done in a very safe environment. So that necessitates calling ahead and making reservations if you want to participate in that. Also, just want to join with Mr. Reddy and thanking our police department. He and I did have I was really grateful to participate in the meeting last night, the community meeting, talking about the drive-by shootings and other community issues. But I'm very proud of our police department and the way that they've responded, not just to this major investigation, but on a day-to-day basis. And I just want to express our appreciation to the way they've responded to some of the challenges that we've seen lately. If there's nothing else, Council, Mr. Brady, what does our schedule of future meetings look like?
Thank you, Mayor. We'll see everyone on Monday, November 2nd for our City Council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the items on our agenda. We'll do a voice vote for adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mr. Luna, seconded by Mr. Freeman. Please unmute your microphones. Council, all in favor of adjourning, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.